The following podcast contains explicit language. You're listening to the Cinematography Podcast presented by Hot Rod Cameras, a program about the art, craft, and philosophy of the moving image and the people who make it happen. Coming to you from the world headquarters of Hot Rod Cameras in Hollywood, California, are your hosts, Ben Rock and Illya Friedman.
So welcome to the Cinematography Podcast. My name is Ben Rock.
And I'm Illya Friedman.
And we're here at Hot Rod Cameras in Hollywood, California. The Cinematography Podcast is it's something that Illya and I have been talking about doing for going on about 7 years now.
Yeah, that's right. 7 years ago, I remember you walked into my office and said, hey, I think it'd be really great if we started this podcast where you and I just talked about, cinematography, and we brought on cinematographers and other people who had a real opinion about cinematography, and we just kind of talked about all the changes and interesting stuff that's going on. And I said, what's a podcast?
What's a podcast? So
what is the Cinematography Podcast?
So 6 or 7 years ago when I went in, you were working at Dalsa, which no longer exists as a cinema camera company.
No, they sure don't.
At the time, they were pioneering the largest cameras known to man.
And very successful at coming up with the largest digital cinema cameras around. In fact, I don't think anyone made one larger.
I found that their cameras affected the tides.
They did have their own gravity, that's for sure.
So the idea that I had back then, and has been refined a bit now, is that we do a podcast where we talk about the art, the craft, the philosophy of the moving image. So it's more about where the ideas come from, where cinematographers come up with their ideas, color palettes, lighting styles, approaches to the actual work, collaboration with directors, collaborations with storyboard artists, collaborations even with actors or any other craftsperson. Less of an emphasis on tech. I'm sure you and I will talk a little bit of tech because that's your stock and trade here.
It's probably inevitable, but yeah, that's not going to be the focus.
We're going to talk to a lot of cinematographers, but we'd also like to talk to storyboard artists and visual effects artists and people who are contributing to the moving image in significant ways. And I feel like we're coming to a point of convergence when you have movies like Life of Pi or Gravity, where the visual effects bleed so heavily over into what is captured in camera. Some movies are pure camera, and some movies kind of combine different elements in interesting ways that can't not be called cinematography, but are kind of informed by numerous disciplines at the same time.
I'm interested in talking to just about anybody who's got a real informed opinion about cinematography and can speak about it intelligently. I like to hear people who have a real opinion about what's going on or how it's being done, and I'm less concerned about their job classification. I think that we'll get some really good people in here who have an opinion and are willing to kick the ball around, so to speak, and maybe we'll have some people who completely have a different mindset than my own or yours, and maybe we'll get some good conversation about this, which is, at least that's my hope.
Yeah, certainly my hope as well. And one of the reasons that I think it's important that we talk about the art and craft and philosophy of the moving image rather than the technology of the moving image. Firstly, I think that there are plenty of people out there who are making amazing podcasts, including Jason Wingrove, that covered the technology. And the technology is fascinating, and we both talk about it all the time, and it's a huge source of fascination for everybody. But I would like these interviews to be something that could be appreciated by, in 20 years when we're shooting on something that you and I can't even conceive anymore, somebody talking about their approach to lighting or the way that they like to work with an actor or the way that they look at the story and figure out the visual arc of the story. That stuff is evergreen in my opinion. And I'm hoping that we get a lot of that, a lot of stuff that is food for thought for people who maybe want to make their own movies or are making their own movies or are people who are already in the business and hearing a completely different perspective. Because even in the few interviews that we've already conducted, once you start talking to people, you realize that everyone has their own process. It's always very different. And it's fascinating to see how you take a script written 90 to 120 pages of words and the pictures that you see in your head when you read it, and then figuring out how to go about getting those pictures. How do you do that?
I got to say, I've been talking to a lot of people lately who have a very different experience than my own, which was started off as a cameraman, came up through the ranks as a loader, second AC, first AC, and eventually camera operator and DP myself, who have just jumped into this and don't necessarily have the same disciplines or foundations that I had coming in, and they're making beautiful, beautiful, amazing images on a daily basis. It used to be in the past that you couldn't just jump in and you couldn't do this right away. It was, cost prohibitive. There was a real sort of mentorship that needed to take place. You had to learn your craft either through schools or through sets or from other people. But I'm really interested in talking to people now who are coming at this from every different direction because the floodgates have opened, and some will say like, oh, well, it's let the riffraff in, but it's also let in some incredibly creative people. And those incredibly creative people are finding their way now to making amazing images, and they're doing it in traditional ways and very non-traditional ways. I think that the Cinematography Podcast could be a wonderful way to hear how these people are going about doing what they're doing from a philosophical standpoint or from a creative standpoint. Not necessarily that I plugged cable A into tab B and that I used my amazing arc fusion reactor camera, which then captured these amazing images and we put them up on a big screen and everyone applauded. So that's at least that's my hope for what we'll be getting.
Absolutely. And another thing that we're going to do in every episode is tease the next interview using a war story. So we're asking the cinematographers who come in to talk to us to give us a crazy story from the set, a turning point in their life, an extreme moment where things all came together. And we'll have our first war story in this episode, and you'll be able to hear that.
We'll also do some short ends. Some
personal obsession of the week or the month or whatever. Things that are actionable by people. Again, I say stay away from. I'm personally going to stay away from tech. Although my first one is an app.
I can't make that claim. I think that's probably the spot that I would talk about something tech related. Although I think for this first episode, I'm going to talk about something completely non-technical. At least it'll just be something that you can go see and enjoy and should see because I think it's probably the best movie this year so far.
So we want to bring in some really interesting people, and to start us off, we brought in Jason Wingrove, who's the co-host of the RC Podcast, which is one of my favorite camera podcasts of all time. Used to be Red Center, and then at a certain point they broadened it out, and it wasn't such a Red specific podcast because they realized they were talking about the Alexa and the 5D and whatever.
Still technical though. It's very, very tech based.
It's all, for the most part, it's tech. They veer into the creative, but Jason Wingrove himself is a very creative guy. Started in the camera department, moved up to cinematographer, moved up to director, and he often directs NDPs at the same time, which I've always wanted to talk to. I want to talk to people like him because as a director myself, I can get an exposure and I can shoot, and I'm not terrible at it, but like he's a phenomenal cinematographer and a phenomenal director. And I always wonder, how do you make those two parts of your brain work at the same time? That's not as easy as it sounds.
He's also a hell of a nice guy, and it was really great to have him come in and to sit down and to chat for a little while. But I think that we should also really point out that it's now, this episode's being recorded, or I should say that you and I are speaking in December 2013, and Jason Wingrove came in to speak with us in April of 2013.
Yeah, so didn't even come in here. We met with him at the National Association of Broadcasters Convention, otherwise known as NAB.
Ben, I think you actually asked him a lot of great questions, and it was a lot of fun, I think, because on his podcast, he doesn't usually delve into all that stuff about himself. And at least I don't believe he does.
He's there mostly to talk about the state of the art in cameras and how he intends to use them. And he inevitably talks a little bit about his creative process. But when you look at Wingrove's work and you go to his website and see the stuff that he does, it has a really striking and awesome look. It oozes a certain vibe that is, all its own. His stuff is really
style. It has a style.
He has a great style. And I think that being that he came up as a cameraman, he's got a great insight. So without further ado, here's my interview with Jason Wingrove.
The Cinematography Podcast interview.
I'm here at NAB 2013, and I'm talking with director, DP, former focus puller, and camera assistant extraordinaire,
Renaissance man,
and one of my favorite podcasters, Jason Wingrove.
Morning.
It's a bright and early morning here in Las Vegas, Nevada, and we're in a kind of a makeshift recording situation in a hotel.
A better place to be in the middle of a huge trade show is be locked in a hotel room sitting on the kitchen bench.
When Illya and I talked about starting this podcast, one of the first people that I wanted to speak with was you, not just because of your expertise in cinematography and directing, and we want to create something that's more about creative process and somebody who has both skills. That's humongous. Additionally, as a podcaster, I feel like you've touched millions potentially on the RC podcast, which is an amazing podcast. And we're not going to really cover the same kind of ground that RC covers, which is mostly technical. So if you want to know Mr. Wingrove's technical interests, I would redirect you to that. But do tell us, where can people find you online if they are looking for your work?
Okay, probably wingrove.tv is my sort of main website, I guess, for work. Follow me on Twitter at twitter.com/Wingrove. That's probably where my sort of 140 characters at a time, a substitute for a blog, mind dump, brain dump, geek fest unravels, I guess. But the main thing is probably wingrove.tv or jasonwingrove.com. Actually, I think you probably go to vimeo.com/wingrove/cpool is maybe another way, because we'll be talking about that later on.
Absolutely. Just start by just giving me your backstory. You grew up by Pinewood Studios, was it?
In UK, born there and moved to Australia when I was 12. But I was trying to work out why I had this sort of interest in the behind the scenes or the making of or whatever it is. And I think it might have been because I used to, every year at Pinewood Studios, where we used to live quite close, we used to go to they have an open day. And just as a child, you're playing with these props. They just leave all the props everywhere, and there'd be like the 007, huge 007 stage. But I think a few times you'd go in there, and there'd be the Superman ice, his sort of Fortress of Solitude or whatever they called it. The huge masses of polystyrene and big rocks you can lift up and props, and it was just fascinating to see this kind of world. And I think maybe that stuck with me. And then when I came to Australia, my father was working in like the movie side of things, so I would go and hang around on set as well. And then straight out of high school into film school, and straight out of film school onto set. Never had a proper job really, and still working out what the hell I want to do with my life.
What did your father do?
He was a stills photographer in London, and he did art department, so production design. I did quite a few big films and like Mosquito Coast and a few quite big films, and classic Australian 80s kind of period, a lot of period films. So and that was kind of my I could just go and hang around on set, and eventually someone I kind of gravitated to the camera department. Spent about 12 years on the camera side as focus puller, camera assistant, and then kind of realized that wasn't really where the creative, on the path to, being a cinematographer, which, is part of my, you can't undo that kind of gearhead kind of thing and the visual side of things. I think I kind of circumvented in film days, which isn't that long ago, circumvented the cinematography side of things and skipped to director because it just was, I think it was just the more creative avenue. I spent a lot of time sitting on Apple boxes next to DPs, having them whinge about the creative frustrations. I mean, now, being a director, it's really no different. There's creative frustrations wherever you go. But at the time, it certainly felt that as a director of photography, you were still very largely subject to someone else's creativity, and you were more the follower than the leader. And I guess I just was more, I want to do that.
Mm-hmm.
I want to do the directing thing, really. So,
but obviously you do the DP thing as well.
I've come back to that through the wonders of digital, I think. Where I started in terms of directing was more drama kind of things, more spoken word, performances, actors doing performance, and which is quite intensive and very focused. And I think the added stress of not just directing, but working out timings and dialogue and cutting it in your head and all the usual baggage that goes into your brain when you're on set as a director. The extra added stuff of the film stress of rushes, not seeing what you get, exposure meters, printer lights, stock choice, all that sort of stuff. How much film have I got left? All those extra choices really are best left to a cinematographer. So I generally didn't shoot my own work in the film days, but as I've got more into the digital side and the stress of wondering what rushes are going to be looking like tomorrow, because I can see them on set now, in front of me, is much less. So I think, and also I think I just, after 12 years in the camera department, I just can't leave it alone. I just can't get my hands off the camera, and I feel very even if it is dialogue, even if it's an intense performance, I feel very much more connected with the performance if I'm just watching through a viewfinder, or I don't know, somehow connected with the operation of the camera, and it just sort of connects me more with the performance and what's going down, I think.
So when you're DPing, I take it you're operating as well?
Yeah, I think, definitely. It's maybe for interviews I might sometimes just have somebody operate, but I think as things have evolved a little bit in the kind of whole Vimeo and the digital thing, there's this whole crossover between that kind of Vimeo kind of doco feel is kind of proliferating into everything we do. Indie films are feeling a bit like it. Commercials are definitely looking like getting a lot more like sort of doco or reality based. I think that style is very much driven by the camera and camera movement and framing and light and things. And I just get a little frustrated sometimes, even working with the best, and no disrespect to the cinematographers I'm working with, they're all terrific, but I sometimes find the frustration of I want to constantly be saying just pan a little bit more to the left, or just do that, or just so frustrating sometimes of the immediacy of not of getting framing right, or seeing something and wanting to frame for it. And sometimes as a director, you're watching for different things outside the peripheral of the frame than you are as the camera operator, or cinematographer. You're kind of thinking outside of, plots or little moments or little asides, or, somebody else, just doing a little flinch or a reaction or something, something other little thing you can catch that as a cinematographer you might not be story-wise or plot-wise attuned to, but as a director who's looking through, you can it also helps you kind of cut it in your head. I mean, you're always, as a director, I guess, cutting things in your head as you go. But I think all the more so when you're looking through the camera, you're almost building the shot. You can already know the pacing of the thing. I'm talking, I suppose, couching all of this in the sort of TVC kind of mode, I suppose, where things are a bit more rapidly cut than features. But I guess this applies to any format. You're already someone who kind of knows the pace and how often you're going to cut, and you kind of get an idea of what you're after. You always editing in your head as you go. So watching through and being in control of the framing is another way to control the edit as you go, if that makes sense. I think you can put camera movement or focus pulls, or even just rocking your body or something, and finding, and you know what it takes to make a scene or to build a scene, or so if something happens that you think is interesting, B-roll, while you're doing the A-roll, you're right there, and it's just a lot easier sometimes to communicate rather than feel like you're interrupting the process all the time by tapping your cinematographer on the shoulder and saying, "Oh, grab that bit, grab that bit," and you kind of feel like it's much less efficient process than just, "Oh, just give me the camera," So I mean, it depends on the project, and depends on the demands, and if there's really intense, even now with the direct digital stuff, if it's really intense, or it's working with kids, or a really tight schedule, or a actor-director relationship intensive project, then I'll leave it to a cinematographer.
I'm interested in this is a question that I always wonder about guys who direct and DP at the same time, which is, how do you bifurcate your brain properly so that you can pay attention to the performance and the composition, that you can be fussing about like, oh, that backlight's flickering or something like that, and also be like fully in the performance?
I think that's a good question. I think you definitely, if I'm looking through a viewfinder, you definitely get a bit more immersed. You're a bit more present to the scene. So you naturally are paying almost you're almost like at 120% attention, I think, by looking through the lens. So you are able to give 60% and 60%, if that makes sense, because I think you're automatically just that little bit more switched on than if you're sitting back in Video Village 12 feet from a monitor with your latte in one hand and your iPhone in the other, and surrounded by creatives or producers or script people. I think just being right there with your eye right in there, really commit, even better with an optical viewfinder, you're right in the middle of the scene, connected with it. And so thus I think you are, and I'm thinking about this as I talk, because I've never actually even thought about why this answer before. You kind of are just that more locked into it, that you can look at that light and look at the the performances and things a little bit more, I think. So again, if it's that intense with performances, I probably won't look through, because yes, the flickering light will probably drag my attention away. I do not know how someone like Steve Soderbergh does it, because he does insane, beautiful photography and sensational performances. But I think when you're into his level, you've got a higher level of actor, and you can almost put 2 A-list actors in a room and give them a script, and it's a gift. Cinema directors always get up on the stage and accept their awards, and the first people they always thank are the actors, because those are the ones that we've all worked with kind of bad actors, and we'll work with really good actors, and you just know the joy that the two people, if they're really working together and they're on their A game, that is just like gold every day. You can walk in, terrific, 1 take, 2 takes, just love it, because they are highly skilled professionals, and you can leave them to it. You can leave the director to do the directing, you leave the actors to do the acting, and if you've got really great guys, you don't need to really be hammering them with notes and doing multiple takes and all that sort of stuff. So I guess as the stakes get higher, the people around you, the professionals around you, are all working at their A game as well. So you can kind of kick back a little bit and just enjoy the process rather than making it a battle.
And I always assume that somebody like Steven Soderbergh or Peter Hyams or somebody like that who do feature films that they DP and direct. Yeah. I always assume too that they probably have the best gaffers that they can have, and those gaffers could probably DP the film too.
And are really exactly right. The best gaffers are the ones that have got your back, particularly if you're shooting. My favorite gaffer in Australia is a guy called Reggie Garside, and he works on. He does Hobbit, and he does pretty much all Andrew Lesnie's work, who's shooting Hobbit and King Kong and all those sort of things. And he will do stuff in the background without even asking, or have something ready before you even ask for it. I'll be looking out the background thinking, that light, has that got darker out there? And he said, oh yeah, no, I put a scrim up because the sun came out, and I didn't even ask. It doesn't even interrupt the process. It's just, so yes, I think you're right. Those guys that are really good at it, like you say, Hyams and Soderbergh, who I think they have got like a gaffer who probably could tomorrow turn around and be a cinematographer. They've worked with it so long, and they are thinking for you, and they know where your head is at, and they know what you're probably going to be not thinking about. So yeah, absolutely, you picked the right guys that have got your back.
I kind of want to get this from everybody, every cinematographer that we talk to. I realized once that 2 of my good friends who are cinematographers, one of them was talking about how his lighting is kind of a perfunctory thing that he does, and for him it's all about the composition. And the other guy was and when I say perfunctory, he's a perfectionist, but he was being modest. Yeah. But to him, the most important part of it was the composition, and he had a fine arts background. Another DP who I'd worked with, even though he'd come up through the camera department, the number one priority for him was lighting. Is there a camp for you? Do you come from one or the other? Is there one thing you not prefer, but are you lighting a shot and then finding a frame for it, or are you creating a frame and then lighting into the frame?
I am a sort of a real sort of naturalist, so to speak. That doesn't mean I like to take all my clothes off. I just love, very much like Soderbergh, he will only put in pracs and interesting things, but he will choose his locations based on how they look straight out of the box. He'll choose places that look great with minimal lighting. I just think, regardless of how much the audience knows about lighting, which is probably nothing, and the audience subconsciously can sense if something's lit or if it's natural and if it's real. I'm all for whatever adds realism to the frame, and if you can make it look beautiful but look honest, then the performances come across as far more honest and come as far more believable, and you buy into it because you believe the scene, because this does not look like Hollywood's come to town, So I will not light things. I'll actually take away light, like actually, block stuff off, or anti-fill or reflect things in, rather than actually put a lighting source in. And if I am getting a cameraman to light for me, I'd suggest that we put lights. If you've got to add light, put it through the windows. Don't put any lights in here. Put lights coming through the exact holes in the walls where the light would normally come from anyway.
Yeah.
So we're not tripping over stands. It's a very natural place to work. It's, you're not working around 50C stands and fleckies and, that kind of thing. So I think I'm probably choosing locations off the bat that look great. Then the lighting is kind of almost taken care of, and you get that inbuilt realism into the scene, and then you can work on performances. Framing, I'm not like crazy anal retentive, like art student kind of, this must be amazing kind of, kind of, millimeter sort of tolerances for the framing and headroom. I like, I like interesting, unusual kind of framing and playing with focus and playing with perspectives a little bit. But it's more, for me, it's about get the light right and get it so that it looks beautiful, but you buy it as a piece of reality, but also a piece of film. I'm not trying to do a doco. I just want, I want whatever helps sell the performances in as being believable, and then the rest is will follow.
And in a lot of your work that I watched. And also, it even says it in your bio that you do a lot of work with real people, not non-actors and stuff like that. Yeah. So can you talk a little bit about the process of working with people who aren't used to having stuff pointed at them and having to perform?
It's really hard because everybody's different, and particularly with kids that do a lot of like it or lump it, you kind of, it's like with your reel or with your work, you kind of get what you give. You get one good commercial on your reel or whatever it is with kids in it, you get given more of that, and before you know, you turn around, man, my whole reel's filled with, how did this happen? My reel is filled with kid stuff, and I'm the kids guy, and I didn't even I didn't ask for this.
And then you make moving day.
yeah, exactly. But kids, I don't know, it's more about getting them to react rather than act. I have a feeling, the sort of theory that there's no such thing as a child. I mean, there is occasionally, like there's exceptions, like absolute savant kind of amazing, born to act DNA kind of kids. But I think there's no real thing as a child actors. There's just kids who have no inhibitions and who have great memory, and it's definitely a numbers game. It's hard to find those great people. It's all in the casting for a start. I mean, it's not, you don't choose any old kid necessarily and make them be great, but it comes down to choosing kids that just have confidence, and they're not really acting, they're kind of reacting to things. I think even if you're choosing non-actors and you're choosing just real kids, then it's all about giving them something to react to. Get in the scene with them, get down on the floor and play Lego with them and be their friend, and build up a bit of a relationship. And it's all about sort of playing games. And I think if you're going to direct kids, it does help to maybe have had them. It's kind of child manipulation, really. It's all kind of manipulating them to get whatever that look is, even if it's a matter of sometimes just look at me and just you go and stand where the other actor is meant to be, and you be the face, and they just look at you and just say, just do what I do, pull this face, do this reaction, and you can almost just play this game. Just keep the camera rolling. There's another reason why I love digital cinematography. Just keep that camera rolling, and then just do a whole bunch of reactions to them, and just get stuff fed back. It's all about reaction. It's very hard to get a child to, actor or non-actor, to really just pretend when you can actually give them something to bounce off, and it's far more genuine. And I think that, I guess, with grown-ups, real non-acting grown-ups, I think it's kind of, in a way, a sort of a more sophisticated and less insulting version of the same thing. Yeah. That you're asking people to, maybe ask them to think of something, or think of an emotion, or to react to something. I think it's important to not get them to try and do something that they're not. Don't make somebody try and be a personality that they're not. I think if you're looking for someone to inhabit a certain role, or to be a certain character, just start off with that character. If you're casting non-actors, so to speak, just if you need a kind of a dweeby something guy, then find a dweeby guy. Don't get a regular guy and try and say, can you act a bit dweeby? I think you want to more sophisticated guy, or put an accent on. Don't try and force someone to go out of their comfort zone, because then you're asking them to act.
Avoid asking real actors to add accents.
Exactly. So if you're trying to get real people to be real people, then you choose them for that role and don't make them be something that they're not, and then you won't get acting. You'll get reacting, I guess.
Yeah, it's more natural.
That sounded pretty. How did that sound?
That was
convincing. That sound like I know what I'm talking about.
It does sound like you totally know what you're talking about. So you were saying earlier that when coming up in the camera department, you'd had a chance to work with a lot of different DPs and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Can you tell me who any of them were? And even if you don't want to talk about specific names, can you tell me about the kinds of lessons that you learned from working with all, I think it's interesting from a point of view if somebody was interested in becoming a cinematographer to become an AC so they could work with as many different DPs as humanly possible.
Yeah, I think, so obviously the key there is to observe and the key to doing it for long enough, as in any role, I suppose, particularly what I think is probably one of the toughest jobs on the set is, like, say, focus puller, is to do it long enough so that what you're doing as a conscious job becomes subconscious. The director I'm thinking of, who I've worked with mainly as a camera operator and a focus puller, and who I probably studied and I think I kind of took on board mentally the most from, is an Australian guy who's probably not all that familiar to Americans, but he's like, pretty iconic for Australians. It's a guy called Ray Lawrence, who did films like Lantana and Bliss and Jindabyne and very Australian stories. But his style is very much that, all about the performance. You can almost maybe not even cut, just have an entire, very Soderberghy in a way, but natural light. A lot of the time, even though I was the camera operator, because he had so little light, I was often the cinematographer by, although not necessarily the uncredited cinematographer, by sheer fact of I could just work the light meter and set it roughly, and putting up lights was kind of like taboo. You just, again, find a good location, and if you did have to do something, and then it would be put a reflector out the window and you're just putting it very, very minimal. He would do what I find myself now unconsciously doing now, is walk around and kick lights out, or say, no, get rid of that, or you can have one. If you need a light, you can have one, because that's where, don't normally have 15 shadows and 10 light sources in a room. It generally comes in from one side. And so I think Ray his style was that it didn't, even if you were shooting a 30-second commercial, you didn't really care about how long a scene ran. That's what editing was for. And he kind of wanted chaos, and it's very much like that sort of, actually that Spielbergian thing where the average Spielberg family breakfasty kind of ET scene was everyone's talking over the top of each other, and there's no real life, life is not structured like you say a word and then you say a line and then you say a line and then you follow a script. It's deconstructing that whole process and making a scene feel like it's playing out and everyone's seeing it for the first time. And it would always roll in rehearsals. He never says action. He would just nod at us and we'd just switch everything on. And he will never say action to the actors. He'll just say, which I love to try and remember. And it's just a nice way of saying it. You just look at the actors and you say, in your own time. And we'd often not get slates, or we'd do tailboards and stuff. Anything that kind of took away that moment of tension, or that whole bit of filmmaking bit of the slate coming in. You just.
And do you work like that? Is that how you?
Yeah, definitely. So I don't even realize that I'm doing it that way. Is that I think that was, again, my part of what I pushed to get digital, to shoot digitally before it was even very much, I think now subconsciously, like Soderbergh did, he would like grab the first prototype red camera or whatever before it even was, paint was dry on it. and because he would just want to have the unrestriction of not being limited to 10-minute takes, or to have the frustration of, even though they're fairly quick, not doing camera reloads, or there's a certain subconscious on-set tension when everybody knows that a photochemical process is happening and they're limited, like the 36 shots is in the magazine, and you've got to make them all count. And some actors thrive on that, and some don't. And I love the idea of being able to improv a scene, or you kind of lose momentum doing that sort of whole stop-start. It's the stop-start thing, you really just want to, for me anyway, once you've done a scene and it's great and it's really starting to work, and once the actors don't worry so much about the process of it, they can relax and interact more as people. And you can, once they've done a shot really well, you can just say, okay, just do it again but do it differently, or why don't you try it, or just reverse it, or and once actors feel that it's okay to make a mistake, it's okay, and it's that kind of a set. We can be relaxed. A fluff or a little tiny stumble or whatever is fine, because that's what people do in real life.
Yeah.
Once actors sort of feel that it's okay to make a mistake, and the tension of getting it right and getting it perfect and getting it in time and getting it done in 27.2 seconds, because that's how long we have for this particular scene. Once they feel it's okay to be themselves, then they start to even themselves stop acting and start being a human, interacting with another human being. And then you can have that talking over the top of you and improving, because I'd love to, I don't want to turn it all into some amazing improv kind of comedy store thing, but improv really means that if there's a better way of saying the words at that time, or if you don't quite remember it, then just say it a different way. Or pause for a minute and then think of your words and then say it. Doesn't really matter. Once you want to sort of, I feel, have a atmosphere on set that is relaxed, so everybody doesn't feel that this is a $5 a second film going through the mag. God better get it done before we rip through another roll of film, tension making process. So I think that's probably what I've learned most from someone like, say, Ray, is the deconstructing the Hollywood coming to town moment and making everyone feel like they're just at home. And that comes from minimal crew too. No lighting. We're not tripping over stands and reflectors, and the room isn't filled with 15 people all staring at them and all standing in their eye line and all that sort of stuff. It's really very minimal. That's why I was the focus puller was the guy taking the light readings. You could kind of get out of your own way,
That's cool, because I'm hearing sort of a pattern emerging in your process creatively, which is to get everything the hell out of the way of the actors and to make it more of a dialogue between you and the actors. So cinematography wise, directing wise, like in everything that you're doing, you're just trying to make the actors less self-conscious.
I guess it's a conflict thing that I don't like, sort of confrontation or whatever, or tension. I just like it to be a relaxed set, and I don't like to feel pressure, and I don't like to feel pressured. I don't like it, so I don't know why they would like it. Every time, if you ever have to stand in front of your own camera, it's a horrifying thing. I think every director should probably try acting for a while, and the shock of that is enough to make you really think about things. So I think it's all about setting up the right atmosphere on set, I think, and just making it a fun place, where everybody feels like they can come up to you with the what ifs. Plenty of time I've had the scene improved by even just whatever, my camera assistant or my first AD. Once everybody on set feels like it's okay for them to come up and suggest stuff, then that's all. You're all the better for it, and you have to be the better man and let, or woman, and let make it okay for people to. It's part of collaboration. If you're a complete auteur don't even approach me, don't even look me in the eye. I have my storyboard and I'm going to tick off my stuff and I know exactly every single frame and how it's going to play out, then no one, it would dare even suggest anything. And then all you get is your own process. You're not open to how things can possibly be better. There's no point having an editor. If you're just going to just go tick off the storyboards, you want someone to collaborate. You want everything. There's I think I love the Ron Howard way of collaboration, that he just surrounds himself with, the very best people in every department, and and he's there worrying about plot and character arcs and script and that kind of thing, and everything else gets taken care of.
So when you're talking about kind of creating this, do you think it's fair to call it like a naturalistic look and a collaborative environment? I know that every set is different and every shoot is different, but what's your ideal size crew to work with?
I mean, you can have as many crew as you like, but it's keeping them off the set, in a way. For a run and gun kind of pretty pictures with a bit of dialogue and things, I'd probably have me shooting, camera assistant stroke DIT person. Maybe if you're shooting a lot of data, that would be 2 people. Probably a boom person and a sound person. If you're running and gunning, maybe that's the 1 person. Definitely, I think, even if you go minimal, I think I still love to have a first AD, even if they are not directly there calling action and coordinating things. Just a person to have your back, to just make sure people are ready when you need them, or to start thinking about the next shot and the next scene. Or also, if you just see someone walk past, you think, that's an awesome face, I need that person, go get them. They can just chase them down and and be like the guy to kind of kick in the doors and take the names. And then probably there's the back end of a couple of production people to again just tie up loose ends and sign release forms, and just generally make sure that there is an excellent espresso machine wherever you go. I mean,
in LA, we just have a Starbucks on every 3rd block. So.
Yeah. No, I'm talking about coffee. What's this Starbucks you talking about?
The one that's right in front of you?
Yeah, not by choice. Maybe that might grow a little bit for a bigger dialogue thing, but generally.
But would you say that you tend to prefer to work with a more minimal crew, if possible?
Yeah, I think so. It's harder to change your mind if you've got this big bus to steer. It's like the big cargo ship. You got to make the decision to turn the corner 2 kilometers in advance. I think you just want to be a bit more nimble, and I mean, it's maybe probably more my style, which is a little bit more run and gun, maybe, and a little bit more natural.
Well, I think that a lot of times you get it in your head that you need a large crew to work with. And digital has certainly helped. I remember even when I was in film school, like I was in a film school where we were encouraged to work with like a 30-person crew. And then I went, and that was like before I went to my bachelor's degree. The place where I got my bachelor's degree, UCF, you would work with 3 people, and I was like, it's never going to look any good. But we're shooting with the same cameras or similar 16 millimeter, and you realize really quickly, well, if you can get the results with a smaller crew, why trouble yourself with why put ankle weights around your ankles? Yeah,
I mean, this is not any golden rule. I mean, there's terrific. There are massive crews and people who love to surround themselves with a lot of people who still easily have the ability to change their mind and go in different directions and follow the what ifs. I've just never found that the case for me. That I feel that smaller is better, but it depends on the people that you have around you. You just need to have the support of everybody, that if you do change your mind, you don't have 50 people going, hang on a second, our schedule's shot because you just shuffled the board and everything's you want somebody to have you back and make it okay. You either have small amount of people that change doesn't matter, or if you are going to have a lot of people, you want people who are going to be okay, open to change. Shit happens, and you have to be open to, once you get immersed in a scene, the better way to do it might just be to do it in 2 shots. Or if you've planned it as a 1-shot deal, you might want to do it as 5 macro shots, or never see someone's face, or play it all from the back of someone's head, or all in a reflection of a mirror, or there might be a quirky creative way that until you can scout it, you can board it, you can You know what I mean? Until you really are sitting there and forced to wait and lean up against a pole and wait for them to light it, and you can't until you maybe look over and you go, hang on, it looks cool from this angle. Come over here. Excuse me, cinematographer, just stand where I am. Can you see this reflection here? How cool would it be if it all just played out here? And, you know, if you're changing your mind for the better, and everyone's should be on for that ride and be happy to make that change if they can see. If you're constantly changing it just to be a dick, or just, you know, and you're chasing your tail and you go over here, let's do it all over here, and then everyone moves it and you do one take, and then you go, yeah, actually back where it is, and everyone then goes, all right, you know, you kind of lose the kind of being a crew person for a while. You kind of you know, it's people are behind you, but if you sort of cock them around, and if you kind of be an undecisive dick, you know, then kind of crew faith can be a bit of a movable, you know, a variable force, you know. But yeah, surrounding yourself with people who support you is good if you're gonna have a big one.
One of the things that I kind of wanted to talk about sort of was your breakdown process when you're brought a project or when you're creating your own project.
That would suggest that I actually have some sort of process like that, or any kind of structure, or really think things through or plan things. That comment, what is it, like, failure requires absolutely no planning. That's kind of how I run. But sorry, go ahead. Your question, please.
No, well, you know, looking at your stuff, like, you know, your stuff has a really naturalistic feel and a look to it, but it's not like a Paul Greengrass kind of a long lens, shaky cam kind of documentary aesthetic. No. You know, like I'm thinking about on your website there was. I should have written down the name of it, but it was that thing where it's like opening day or something like that, where they're getting into the water and they're putting ice in the water.
That's a doco piece, really.
Yeah, but it's like all these like.
The opening ceremony
epic,
of
slow motion, you know, like like everything feels super composed, super, like it feels like you planned it, but looking at it, I mean, obviously you planned it, but it almost feels like you had created it from scratch. But we realize it's, you know, these are real people, so you had to kind of work. It's
definitely real people. The idea, and I'm sure maybe if you have show notes, you can put links in there. Otherwise, it's probably just, I'm sure if you go to jasonwingrove.com, you'll see it there. I think it's called Opening Ceremony, and it's. I've kind of been doing this running little personal project of documenting just the people who go and do ocean pool swimming, which is a bit of a unique Australian thing. But there's a great swimming club called Bondi Icebergs, and they have every year at the sort of beginning of the winter swimming season, they have this opening ceremony where they have chunks of ice, and, you know, everybody who's joining the club grabs a block of ice and everybody jumps in the pool all together. But the process was like his handing out all the ice and all that sort of stuff. So I think I had no idea how that. I just knew it was on at this particular day, and I just grabbed a friend's that had the Vice Cam, like a Phantom, and I shot with my Epic as well. And it was just purely just a doco piece. But slow-mo obviously just adds magic and loveliness and to everything.
Yeah.
But we didn't know how it was going to plan out. It was like, you know, it was chaos, and I kind of had a man on the spot who kind of knew the club, and he could kind of say, the ice will come here, and then they hand it all out, and then this is, but you have to really be open to just, there's stuff there that you have them all jumping in the water at 1,000 frames a second. You can't do that twice.
Yeah.
You know, it happens, and, you know, luckily we got it on both cameras, but there is I think maybe just good editing, he said, being the person who edited it. Luckily, maybe good editing can make a whole bunch of shots look like it had a structure and a plan. But the plan was to just, while we're waiting for all this stuff to come out, just shoot let's set up the atmosphere, just shoot faces and stuff, and then follow the process as a documentary, follow the ice coming out, follow it being handed out, people playing with the ice, because there's a while people just holding the ice and kids playing with it and all that sort of stuff, and then they all line up and then they all jump in and then they play. So it really was just following the natural progression of the day.
So that being like a straight up documentary more,
yeah.
But a lot of the work that you have reflects what you're saying, which is that you want stuff to feel spontaneous, you want stuff to look like it's in the real world, not the big Hollywood thing. You're not going for that style of lighting, that style of filmmaking.
Yes.
And you achieve that. But I mean, is it more about just how you talk to your designers or your your crew, your scouts and stuff like that?
Yeah, I mean, you obviously can't, particularly with television commercials, you can't go into it without a plan. You can't go into it. You're not even generally not allowed to go into it from an agency or people paying the money to go into it without a storyboard. And even when I'm forced to do it and I say, I don't need a storyboard, get screwed. I don't want to do it. I don't have time and I don't need that shit. And when you're forced to sit down, and even if you don't have a storyboard artist and you just got the one just doing your own little stickman figures, you suddenly realize, oh, okay, yeah, maybe doing your own boards is actually not a bad idea. And maybe now I've thought about it, I'm going to do it a different way. Because the actual being forced into think about the process of planning a little bit can definitely be good, even if you don't think you need to do it. Just being made to do it is actually a bit of a voyage of discovery, and you go, oh, actually, yeah, what if this? And yeah, well, it can get you excited about a project. If sometimes jobs just come to you and you think it's gonna suck, and sometimes going through the process of planning it and breaking it down can actually be something that gets you to like.
So what is your process? Like, if I give you a script?
Yeah, I still haven't answered the question really, have I?
Yeah. Well, it's a tough question, and there isn't like a way people do it. So
I mean, the average way, at least for Australia, for the process for the planning for TVC would be, I mean, obviously we would get a script, and I have to then, it's 3-way pitch generally for they'll choose 3 or 4 directors that would like all your work, and are you available, and do you like this, and we had a telephone call, and you can string 3 words together, and we kind of got on, please pitch for this job. So writing the treatment process is probably A, the most painful, but B, again, like the storyboards, it's a forced process that sometimes make you think about it and makes you break it down and makes you sort of start to work out how you do it. So probably writing the treatment is the first step to working out what the A, B, C, and D is, what the shot, because you have to almost break it down to shot by shot. What do we start with? What do we open with? How does it kind of pan out? Is it all done in one shot? Is it all done in slow motion? Is it all just done in macro? Or break it down to a written version of a storyboard. And then obviously once you get the job, then you can start to do the storyboards. I don't like to do the storyboards until I've found a location and the location's approved. And then you can really look at the photographs you've taken and start to think about where is the best place to the geography of how to plan this out. I hate doing boards and then we find our location, because then there's going to be a better way of doing it, or an interesting, might have someone on 2 other sides of the room, or someone, where people sit and stand can be a very powerful thing in terms of just establishing their relationship to each other. You've got, particularly with TVCs, you've got 30 seconds to establish characters, a plot, a beginning, a middle, and end, and have some fun, hopefully, along the way. It's very, very hard to do that without trying. Every single shot needs to do 5 things. You don't have enough time to set up a character, so every shot has to try and kind of help you tell something about that person. So you don't have enough time to set up the plot. Every single shot has to kind of help you with that. It can't just all come from the words. The first step is the big one is writing the treatment. As much as I absolutely hate the process, it's unfortunate sort of
do you do
step.
that do you do that on a longer form project?
It's more, I'd probably call it more of a director's overview, and I like to even just title it that way so people aren't expecting the shot by shot breakdowns. It's more like we just talk about the style of the piece and give some reference and give an overview of how you will approach it, sort of strategically or practically, rather than specific stuff, because generally if it's such a long form thing, or there's obviously far too much to say, but also there's a lot to evolve that's going to happen after the treatment thing. Generally the treatment's like a bit of a pitch thing, so they're either trying to work out for a short thing how you're going to do it, or for a longer thing they're trying to work out what is this going to be for a longer thing? It's less structure, but more about the general style, I suppose.
Can you walk me through maybe a little bit of your process through something more people might have seen, like Moving Day? You know, especially given that has tons of visual
effects. That was very
effects.
Structured and boarded up because of its VFX nature. Breaking it down to storyboard is very important for VFX because.
But you also have a little kid in it too, so you have to have the freedom.
We have to work out what can we get away without. The time on set is very structured and very much governed by government bodies who say a child of this certain age can only be on set for this long and in front of camera for this long, and for every shot you want to work out. Okay, we've got this foreground element, the background element. What do we need for this? Is this a green screen? Is this a background plate? Does this need to be a plate? Work out what the elements are, how you actually achieve it. So the storyboarding thing for that one particular was paramount going into it, and because it actually helps you then schedule the job and structure the production and how much of this is going to be green screen. When you work out every frame, and you work out, gee, we've got 20 green screen shots. Does that mean then we need 2 days in green screen or 1? Or you almost need to board it before you can then even schedule it, before you can even then budget it. So
how many days did you guys shoot that for?
It was a bit fractured, partly because of availabilities of crew and availabilities of the location, and which is a major part of the a character in itself in the film. And we had green screen elements and like wire work and stuff. So it's probably maybe 2 or 3 days at the house, and then a day which was not enough, but a day in green screen with kind of wire work and shooting plates and things, and that just by the sheer action of having to light things and green screen and props and wire work and stuff is a complete time tunnel. So whatever day, if you think you need a day, get 2. Or aim for more than you think, because it's that's a real time sink. So it probably was about 5 or 6 days all up, broken around. But we were working pretty quickly because we had to with our little girl. She was only on set for a few hours every day, and not just her limited time, but her limited attention span.
Yeah, because it looks like she's having a lot of fun. But if you've ever worked with little kids,
it is particularly her, because we ended up choosing her for. I was after the kind of Amelie kind of little pixie-ish kind of really, and she was way younger than I intended, but we just loved her so much that we thought, okay, she's hard to work with, not in the bad way, but she's, she needs work. She's to be nursed. Every shot needs to be we had older kids and they were less work, so it's always that balance with kids, or with anybody, I suppose, is like you want to have the cute value and the the sense of wonder and the sort of wide-eyed interestedness, and that happens with younger kids. But by going younger, you lose control. Yeah. So if you want to go with older kids, you can get much more control, and they'll do a bit more, and they'll have a better attention span. They get tired less, and all that sort of stuff. But you do lose that kind of cute factor, or that sort of worldly wonder thing, and you can get away with less just from a plot wise. Little kids, you can almost get them to do anything in a script, and you kind of think, well, it's a little kid, they're going to do whatever. But the older kids get, you kind of think, that kid would never do that. Come on, kids are pretty smart. Yeah, it's always a payoff, I guess. Well,
you made the right choice, if for nothing else, just the shot of her with that flamethrower.
It was hysterical. And even that flamethrower was a complete prop. I think she kind of was a bit timid she's a very timid girl, and was very sort of timid about being on set, and would find any excuse not to do a shot, like, oh, the strap is itching me, or this is too heavy, or just already being a little bit of, not a prima donna, but it was more from the point of view that she was kind of anxious about being there, and she could find any reason to not be in front of the camera.
I've worked with grown-up actors who do the same stuff.
Yeah, so. Exactly right. I don't think it was being a prima donna. It was just like, it was more from like, I don't really want to do this, and can we hurry up? And so we had to kind of re-engineer the whole spray gun, the whole flamethrower. And we also, because she was so young, we actually lost a few other actresses because of the content. Like, the parents didn't want them once they found they didn't want you can't kill fairies, and I don't like the content, and it's very mean-spirited and stuff. Well, from a board point of view, when there's so much of the tone of that film that you don't get necessarily in the storyboards. which when you see, it can be a reaction and an expression and something, and the music and the pace and can make it upbeat. As a storyboard, that could definitely come across as being Rambo, unless you get the fun at the end. The whole Rambo bit could be your main takeout. So we lost a couple of kids because parents said, actually, no, I don't think so.
Well, you probably don't want those parents on set for that shoot then anyway.
But be able to have Darcy that we did, we had to have the parents were very, very cool, but they said, look, let's be nice about this. It's not a flamethrower. It's a bubble blower. We're not killing fairies. Because half of them were sometimes like a little dot on a stick that she was just looking at. You had to
you play that game with
had to kind of play the game. This is what we're going to do today. We're gonna
But did she see the final product?
Yes, and she came to a few festival things and a few screenings and a few opens, and I was very concerned that when she saw it she would completely freak out, and I was worried that when she first saw it, what would she think? And of course she was just like completely really cruisy parents, and she came from like a dance background, and her mum was a dance teacher and stuff, so it ended up how we ended up, you have to find the process. And the process for Darcy was everything almost became like a dance move. And I kind of had the very best kind of version of a stage mum, in that when we weren't shooting, she would be doing the dance teaching kind of thing,
that's cool.
So we could almost you'd make every scene, right, when you rather like run here and point here and look, it was kind of like step 1, 2 and turn 1, 2, and you could kind of turn it into a little bit of a choreographed thing,
but that
was her way.
But she comes across very natural in the film. She doesn't come across like sometimes when you watch a child actor, they're like, okay, now I walk over here. Okay, now I turn my head. But you don't get that sense.
And I think that's also partly, again, the reacting, not acting thing. That I'm when she's looking at stuff, we've got dollies on sticks, we've got stuff floating out of frame. I'm bashing stuff to make a loud noise, like like when you hear the noise, that's when this is happening. So I would have like just get a cooler box and whack it as a reaction, and we'd have something on a stick, and I'd be the whole time. It's a good thing that it's not a dialogue driven thing, because I'm talking over the top. Look behind you, it's coming. What's that noise? Can you listen? Look. Can you turn around now? Turn around. Just constantly. What is it? Is it over there? Is it behind me? Where? What? You're kind of just prompting them the whole time. So I think, it's a struggle. And there's a lot of stuff where we don't have enough time to tick off all the boards. Let's just shoot a whole bunch. We'll just steady cam around you and just throw balls at her, and she can just hit them. And
Been there.
Sometimes we don't have the chance to do these 10 boards. We're just going to shoot some random stuff and cut it together. And half of what you're seeing as brilliance is just good editing, and just cutting out a lot of bad bits.
But I think Moving Day is also a good example of a film where, even hearing you tell the stories of making it, it's all about creating this environment for this little girl that can be as real for her as possible. And yet at the same time, it has a real lush, beautiful, very photographic look to it. It doesn't. Again, I'm not down on Paul Greengrass. I love his movies. But it doesn't have. It doesn't have that. We're dropped into the action. I wanted to ask a little bit about film, and I think I know what your answer is. But what do you miss from the film days?
Well, actually having someone who physically laced it, carried it around, dragged it through customs, hand inspections in black bags, keeping it cold, keeping the stock level of a certain, we need to have this many rolls of this speed film and this many rolls of this speed film, and we need to book the couriers in time to get more if we're running out of particular stock, and having to manage it and fridge and not a lot. I don't miss much of that. But now I find when I come close to a film camera, I just instinctively just want to go and hug it and just want to give me a roll of film. I don't care if it's dead. I just want to lace it. I just want to put some celluloid through it and just touch it. And so
is that more reconnecting with your youth?
It's just reconnecting with the muscle memory of the whole thing and the analogness of it. What do I miss? I guess there is a lot to be said for when we run out of film, we've run out of film. We can't do anymore. That's it. Sorry, I've got it. We love it. Thank you, agency. Don't ask me to do any more because, oops, we ran out of film. I guess there's still stuff can go wrong, but, Arri made cameras that, and same with Panavision, but they made cameras that you take them out of the box, you plug in a battery, they fucking work. Those cameras work. Arri make the like military spec thing, and still doing it today in the digital world, luckily. But generally, there is something about the bulletproof going into the war zone thing that you don't need a backup 5D or whatever. You had that camera and that was it. And there is definitely I guess that is something to be missed sometimes. You don't have the technical fartassing that goes on. It was definitely a two-system thing where sound is recorded over there and vision is recorded over there, and never the twain shall meet, and everyone, you turn it on a camera, an Arri camera, and it runs and it records things and it works, and there's that bulletproof kind of thing, I suppose, that is it can't, no, it's sometimes missing. We get a bit technical about, and guilty completely, hand up, I'm guilty, getting in and out of planes and all that kind of stuff, and getting in and out of borders and customs and things. It's like, it's a freaking pain in the ass. Film can be wonderful and looks lovely, but we're getting to the point where we can replicate it visually, and certainly logistically it's not easy, shooting in a foreign country, say, where there is no labs. You got to get unprocessed film out of there without being x-rayed and kept, not, keeping coolish and not knowing what your rushes were until a day after you land or whatever. And just the sheer weight of lugging it around and waiting for it to be loaded, and we've shot so much film that the loaders can't keep up. We all now have to stop work and wait for it to for them to catch up. So
I'm kind of with you. I've talked to some people who started within the last 8-10 years, and they've never shot film. They're like, I'd like to shoot film sometime. And I'm like, I think you'd like to have shot film.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't think that you really would love the feeling of on my senior thesis film in college, the camera assistant loaded, we were shooting on an SR2, and he loaded the magazine, but he didn't latch it properly, and they put a brand new roll of film on there, chink, and the door just kind of went, and it was like, and it's like, there went $120 that I had to wait tables for however many hours to make. And anyway. I think I'd love to have my last film shoot again, because then I would have appreciated it more. I really want to try and somehow find a shoot that's got the budget to do, while there is still film around and while there's still a lab open to process it, to do my last film shoot and relish it and appreciate it and absorb that process, because I probably have already done my last film shoot and I can't go back and have that again and sort of mourn over it. It's funny, isn't it? I kind of hate it, but it's a love-hate thing in a way. So I really only have one other question, and kind of like your film thing, I'm like, the question that I think probably is on everybody's mind as they're listening to this kind of a podcast is like, if you were starting out today, what advice would you like to have? Like, what would you say to somebody who's starting right today?
That is so hard, because when I got into film school, like the criteria for it was do you have the color blindness test? And show us a few slides that you've shot, and that was great. Hey, you're in. Nowadays, you pretty much have to be Steven Soderbergh to even get in the door of a film school. You have to sort of be so experienced. I think I know, it sounds probably hackneyed kind of thing to say, but just get out and just pick up it's so easy and cheap to pick up a camera now. Just go out and shoot something, but try and do a story, for God's sake. Get people involved, have humans. Even if you're just going to do a doco, make sure it's about humans and not necessarily about a time-lapse montage. People like to see human faces and human stories, and you can just go, even if it's just pick up a camera, get a cheap, fast 50mm lens and whack it on, borrow someone's 5D Mark II and go out and just find what's on an interesting local event in your area and go out and document that. Because just the process of documenting, even if it's not necessarily a scripted story, you still then need to, you will be forced into somehow trying to make, or you will learn about doing a beginning and a middle and an end. Like the icebergs thing, you kind of have the preparation of it and what is going on here. This is really unusual, and then it all happens, and then the fun afterwards. It's kind of like documenting an event and then by choosing your shots and kind of working out how, and through editing as well, you can make a beginning and a middle and an end by editing. You can choose something you shot as your very last shot, but it might be perfect as your opening shot.
Yeah.
Create that sort of, build it up, what's happening, and then release the tension, and and you can do that. And it's a great learning thing to shoot. Learn what coverage you need, even in something that's happening you don't have any control over. Learning how to shoot coverage that will give you that story later, even, as I say, you don't have any control over it. That's probably the most fun you'll have in your whole career, is getting out there where no one's telling you what to do, and you're just you're doing it for the fun of it and not to pay the mortgage.
So that was Jason Wingrove, recorded back in April of 2013 at the NAB convention.
Thank you for your patience, Jason. I know you've sent me one or two messages saying, "Hey, is that ever going to be heard by anyone?" And the answer finally is yes.
At long last. Thanks, Jason.
Thank you.
Wherever you are. So in every episode, we're going to be doing a little preview of our next guest, and we're doing it in the form of a war story. A war story is a critical moment in the life of the cinematographer, a strong moment, a horrific moment, a turning point of one way or another.
Could be heroic.
Could be heroic, could be inspirational. In fact, the one that we have this week is quite inspirational, and it's from our cinematographer, who we will be featuring in our next episode, Chris Chomyn.
Chris Chomyn, ASC.
Chris Chomyn, ASC. I think Chris was a really sweet guy. He gave us a lot of time. He gave us a lot of great insight. And here is his war story.
And now, war stories.
At 7 o'clock one morning, my phone rang, and I answered it. And it was my father who asked me, if he had woken me up. And I said, "No, I'm just getting home. I've been shooting all night." And he said, "What are you doing? Were you shooting all night?" And I said, "Yes, I was shooting all night. I was shooting Phantasm 3. And we were shooting nights. It's a horror film. So I was just getting home, and I had to go to sleep." And I said, "It's great to hear from you. I can't really talk much. I kind of need to get to bed. I have a huge day tomorrow, and I'm really way over my head." And of course, he wanted to know what I was doing. So I told him, and this is the hearse stunt. The pink hearse hits the pipe ramp, and the movie hits the boulder and goes flying through the air. So we were doing a pipe ramp jump. I had never done that before. And I think, to record, it's still the longest pipe ramp jump ever accomplished. So I told him about it. I said, "I have 5 cameras. I have no idea what I'm doing. I'm really nervous. I need to get some sleep, and I got to go find the location." And he was in Maine calling me, so I said goodnight, and I went to bed. A couple hours later, I got up, drove out to Malibu Highway, or Mulholland Highway. We have about 6 hours to get ready. The stunt guys are figuring out where the ramp's going to go and bolting the pipe ramp into the ground and making some changes. I'm getting the lights in place with the electrical crew, figuring out which cameras are going to be at what frame rates and where they're going to be positioned. And the stunt coordinator draws this diagram, and he says, "The car's going to hit the ramp at 55 miles an hour, and it's going to land here." And he shows me exactly where it's going to land. So I put a camera in a crash box exactly there, thinking the car's going to come down and right on the camera is going to be fantastic. Of course, as we're getting ready, one of the lights goes out, big 12K goes out, and all of a sudden now I have 1 light instead of 2. And of course, it's not where I want it, so I have to move it, and we can't get it to work. During all this, there was a road inspector from the county who was drinking maybe bourbon, it smelled like. And he was very adamant that at 10 o'clock we were done. So we had till 10 p.m. If that car was not in the air and on the ground at 10 p.m., we were done. The plan is, of the 5 cameras, there's one that's kind of ways down the road on a long lens shooting back towards the car. So the car's going to come flying towards that camera. The idea is that we're far enough away that it's going to be fine. But the idea is that should the car land on its wheels, which is possible, and it starts coming towards us, the double safety is that there's a van standing by that's supposed to drive out and get between the speeding hearse coming towards me on the camera and me. So this van's going to be demolition derby with the hearse. And additionally, there's a stunt guy who's harnessed in to this hillside next to it, and he says, if the car's coming towards you, I'm going to grab you and we're going to jump. And I said, "Well, shouldn't I be in a harness and tied in?" He said, "I got you." I'm kind of a big guy. I thought, I don't think you're going to be able to hold me. I think this is a really bad idea, but I'm young and kind of stupid, naive, so I go along with it. So we're all getting ready, and everything's set. I start walking to my camera to man it. And there's a crowd is formed because obviously all the neighbors or people out there want to see what's going on. We have, there's lights and there's a lot of vehicles, and they know there's something big happening because we have the road blocked off. So the AD says, excuse me, folks, you guys have to be over behind the van. At the very least, they'll have to be on the other side of the van. But there's a guy there with a video camera kind of shooting. He's kind of in my face, and I'm trying to be a little nervous, and I'm going to get ready to do this shot. We have one take. We have two hearses, one we can destroy and one we need for the rest of the movie. I'm getting ready, and I said, excuse me, sir, you have to go with everybody else. And he lowers the camera, and it was my father, who 12 hours before, 10 hours before, was in Maine when he called me. I don't know how he found me. I don't think I ever asked, or maybe he didn't tell me, or maybe I've forgotten, but I was just floored. We did the shot. It was kind of spectacular. The car totally overshot the crash cam because even though he's supposed to hit the ramp at 55 miles an hour, he probably hit it closer to 70, so he went flying. Car crashes, lands, and rolls. It's filling my frame, and all I can think of is, is that stunt guy going to really pull me out? Because all I have is car in my frame. I think I'm about to get run over, but I'm holding on for dear life shooting. Finally, I hear cut called. I look up, and the car's pretty far away. It was okay. It wasn't that close. Bob Ivy, who was the stunt driver, was in the car when he did this. He said he blacked out pretty much as soon as he hit the ramp. And so when he landed, they checked him first thing. We checked him, made sure he was okay. And they actually took him to a hospital and have him checked out by a doctor, and everything was great. Like the wind was knocked out of us. It was exhausting, the buildup and the aftermath. And my dad, he had his VHS camcorder with him, probably VHS-C or something. He said, I got the whole thing on tape, because we had no video assist. So we're like, well, we hope that was good. Whatever, we had no video assist. He goes, I got the whole thing here. I got it all on tape. I said, really? Let's watch it. So Don came over, and I rewound the tape a bit. We're all kind of crowding around, just the three of us, Don, my father, and myself. We're crowding around the viewfinder, and you see the car coming towards us, and it goes up in the air, and as soon as it goes in the air, the camera tilts to the ground, and you hear my father say, holy shit. And I have a shot of the road and his foot. We don't have any of the rest of the shot. But it was just it's. That for me was such a significant moment, because the fact that he would somehow find his way out there and come out all that way so quickly without announcing it. And then he spent about a week with me, I guess, and every night he would kind of hang out and sleep in my car and then come out and check out what we were doing and then go take a cat nap. And, he's not a young man. At the time, he was in his 60s for sure, but not terribly old either, but it was not his lifestyle. And so it meant a lot to me that he came out. After all the years of struggling, and all the times of being told, I should maybe think about what else I might do with my life, go to law school or whatever, to have him show up, it just was very special. And I always get choked up when I think about that.
So we've arrived at the end of our show. I hope you're still with us. In every episode, we're going to do what we call short ends, which is our obsession of the week. What you got for us this week, Illya?
Okay, my obsession of the week is the movie Nebraska. I think Nebraska is probably the best movie of 2013. I've seen just about all of the big movies of the year, so I'm not saying that lightly. I think Nebraska is spectacular. It also has, in my opinion, some of the best cinematography, and it's cinematography that you don't get to see every day. In fact, I don't know how many black and white movies have been shot in the past decade, but I gotta believe it's not very many. This is a black and white movie that was shot on an Alexa, and I think it predates the monochrome Alexa, which is just now available for people out there.
Monochrome Alexa, really?
Monochrome Alexa. It's actually has the ability to do infrared as well, and some amazing, dark skies and white foliage and all of that kind of stuff if you add the right filtration. But
news to me, man. I hadn't heard about that.
Yeah, it's a for rental item only. It only rents out of Airy directly, and it's not available for sale, but boy, does it look spectacular. I don't believe that's what was used on Nebraska. I believe it was just a typical Alexa, although it was an Alexa recorded in Airy Raw to a Gemini 444 convergent design recorder. That's as much tech as I'm going to go into it, but I think that's pretty cool because that is kind of like the low budget way to get Airy Raw versus the Codex recorder or some of the other systems out there, which are much larger and more expensive. And it's a beautiful movie, shot really well with some great performances. And if you have not seen Nebraska, I know it doesn't have a lot of special effects. It doesn't have a lot of big name, young, attractive celebrities. It is a spectacular movie, and you should totally go see it.
That's awesome. Point of trivia, by the way. I know Alexander Payne's casting director. His name's John Jackson. And if you've seen Return of the Living Dead, the Dan O'Bannon classic from, I believe, 1982, 83, John Jackson, Alexander Payne's casting director, is the zombie who asks for more paramedics.
Wow. My jaw is on the floor right now. I did not know that you knew that about his casting director, and all I can ask you now is, did you work on that movie? How do you know this?
Well, Return of the Living Dead is one of my favorite zombie movies. It might be the first zombie movie I ever saw that had running zombies, and it's hilarious. It's written by Dan O'Bannon, written and directed by Dan O'Bannon, the guy who created Alien. And it's, if you haven't seen Return of the Living Dead, it's awesome. This is not my short end, by the way.
Oh, okay.
But I actually worked with John on a project, and he's a fantastic casting director. But when he came out here, like a lot of casting directors, he came out here to be an actor, and so he plays that zombie. And like a friend of mine actually has a friend of mine has a T-shirt that says "Send more paramedics," which is his quote. I took a picture on my iPhone and sent it to him on Facebook. I mean, it's iconic amongst horror nerds like myself.
I just realized how dumb it was for me to say that. Did you work on that? If that's the first, zombie film that you saw, you said 82.
Yeah, and I wouldn't have been old enough to
have even seen it at the time
to drive or have pubic hair or things. So when that movie came out, I was pretty young.
Wow. Do you think you could get him on the show?
JJ, I bet if he's in town, I bet he would do it.
That would be awesome.
He's a nice guy. My short end is the Hollywood Camera Works Shot Designer app. I would ask that everybody kindly ignore that the word Hollywood is in the name of their app and check it out. Since I was in film school, I've always broken scenes down by making overheads and using a legal pad and putting stupid little V symbols where the camera is supposed to be and arrows and stuff like that. And it always was chicken scratch that only I could decipher. And it wasn't until I found the Hollywood Camera Work Shot Designer app that I found an easy, fast, super cheap way to do it in a way that I could distribute it to everybody and they would all immediately know what the hell I was doing.
When you say super cheap, is this a free app?
There is a free version of the app, and you can use it.
Oh.
And I used it for a shoot on the free version. And then if you decide to buy the pro version, it's $20. And when you get the $20 version, you get an install for your Mac or PC, for whatever phone or tablet you have, and they make it for, I think, virtually every phone and tablet. I know at least all Apple and iOS devices plus all Droid devices are supported, and they sync via Dropbox. And when you're done, as you're using this app, it builds a shot list for you that you can then export as an Excel spreadsheet or as a PDF with your diagram, and you can also just send it out as a JPEG so everybody can see where it is. It's very fast and easy and efficient. In fact, this past week I was on a scout for a project I'm going to be second unit directing, and I kind of thought, why don't I use this? And we were in multiple locations, a few of them houses, and I'm no architect, but I was able to very quickly do a floor plan of the whole house so that the first unit director, if he should choose to use it, and definitely I could say, can communicate to everybody and say, okay, camera position here, camera position there, camera position here, camera position there. And, actor walks in this way, actor walks out that way, however you want to do it. And it can go into as much or as little detail as you feel like giving people.
That's pretty cool. Not too many people are doing apps like that for Android, and I know that you are a iPhone person, and I am, on the dark side. I have the Android here, but I will actually download that for free and check it out because that sounds pretty damn cool. Although this sounds like a giant commercial for that product, and we're in no way associated with that app.
I'm no way affiliated. Although I will admit, they were looking for free beta testers, and I joined their beta team because I thought it was such a cool app.
Huh.
But yeah, I don't know the guy. Never met him in person. I just think it's a cool app. There are things that they have promised that they will add to it, like script integration, which I hope they eventually get around to doing. But honestly, just the way it is, I use it on every shoot that I ever do, and it's the most useful thing ever.
Well, you know what? We're probably going to go to Vegas for NAB, and you said that the guy who wrote this thing or published it is in Vegas?
I think he is.
Well, maybe he'll come on the show.
I would love to get that guy on the show.
Okay, cool. Well, that app actually sounds pretty awesome, and I think I would try it just for the fact that it's free, and I have an Android device, so spectacular, I will play around with that and, maybe design an overhead.
Yes, I think you'll dig it.
Nice.
So that should wrap us up here for episode 1, the cautionary tale / Jason Wingrove interview of the Cinematography Podcast.
Yeah, and also the cool plug for Nebraska and the Mouthful app. What is that called? The Hollywood...
The Hollywood Camera Works Shot Designer app.
It
sounds much cheesier when I put on my morning zoo voice to say it. Assuming we have the ability to do so, we'll put a link to all of our short ends on the Cinematography Podcast website.
We do have the technology. We do. Well, that's it.
Yeah, that's episode 1 of the Cinematography Podcast.
Long time coming. Really glad that it's here. 7 years in the making. And the good news is there's a whole bunch of new episodes coming up soon. Here we're going to have another 6, at least in the coming weeks, and probably another dozen or so behind that.
That'll be great. So, Illya, where can people find you online?
Of course, you can find me here at hotrodcameras.com. And Ben, where can they find you?
I'm at benrockonline.com, and you can also follow me at Twitter at Neptune Salad.
Hey, who did the music for the show?
The music is done by my good friend Kaze Alatrachi. You can check him out at musicbykaze.com.
He's awesome and totally available for music for you as well.
For pay. Please pay him.
Yes, give him lots of money.
So thank you everybody for listening, and we'll see you next episode.
This has been the Cinematography Podcast, presented by Hot Rod Cameras. Find your next camera, lens, or accessory on the web at hotrodcameras.com. Don't forget to subscribe to our show on iTunes and connect with us on Facebook and Twitter. Thanks for listening.